All right, guys, should we now finally get into the finale of She-Hulk?
Oh,
If we have to.
be prepared.
She-Hulk episode 9, entitled Whose Show Is This? Not mine, I don't think. I mean, I'm still actually processing this episode a little bit because, like, we'll get into it, but
there's a lot.
The implications of what happens in this episode are mind-boggling. Okay.
There's so much. It's
we'll get into all of it. So we start. Jen has a dream that's basically an ode to the 1970s Hulk show, which I kind of like that.
Part of me was like, the entire show should have been this.
It might have been better.
It probably would have been better.
She after that dream, she awakens in prison. Because they had to reuse that set that Emil was in prison. Right. And she's greeted by her friends, her lawyer friends. Jen, she wants to go after the bad guys, but Miss Book tells her to take a plea deal, which involves her putting on the inhibitor bracelet. So it's on the news that, she can't be Hulk anymore, She-Hulk anymore. And I guess, she's cleaning out her office, so I guess it got her fired from her job, too.
Yeah. Fired.
They don't actually show her boss firing her, but she's cleaning out her office and everything. Jen is hounded by the media, and so that causes her to move in with her parents. But does that even do her any good? Because in the news, it shows the news is camped out at her parents' house because her dad, Perfect Stranger's dad, is running them off with his hose or whatever.
Well, part of me is like, okay, you can't afford rent anymore, so
I think
you can save some money on rent. And just,
is that what the implication was?
I don't know.
She didn't have money anymore.
Yeah, that was my write-off.
Her dad says, if you can't find a job, you can always stay with us.
Oh, okay. I never know what the time frames on this show is like, because it's not like she would have ran out of money immediately,
right.
But
or your lease.
So Jen and Nikki have a traditional conspiracy board with the tacks and the strings and all these pictures of intelligentsia. So they're trying to figure out who's behind it all.
So at this point, the entire season, I've been who's going to be the bad guy? And it's okay, we're going to have to all these plot problems where we it's not building up to anything. It's who's going to be the bad guy? And so finally it's intelligentsia. And we're okay, we thought that was a possibility. It's intelligentsia, I guess, and let's see how it plays out. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see how it plays out.
Not well. Jen says that basically there's a bunch of intelligentsia is kind of comprised of all these offshore shell companies, making it very difficult to find out who's in charge or whatever. So Nikki kind of suggests that, they need to get these guys with violence or something, and Jen's no, I'm going to take him down, but I'm going to do it legally with my lawyer expertise. So that shithead guy Dennis from the earlier episode,
Dennis,
he goes on the news and says that Jen used to date, he and Jen used to date, and that she was a psycho long before she got the superpower.
Call back to him being just a horrible person, man.
There's a scene where Jen's in bed and she's she's kind of lamenting the fact that she's not able to turn into She-Hulk anymore, even though that's what she thought she wanted in the previous episode. Jen texts Bruce, but he's unavailable. So then she texts Emil, but he's also unavailable. So she decides she's just going to drive to Emil's house. Because I guess in that previous episode, he said she could swing by anytime.
Whenever, yeah. So at 12 p.m., she's it's, or is it a.m. or p.m.? I forget. But
a.m. would be
at 12 dark o'clock, right? She's I'm going to go see Emil because he said anytime.
So there's one small scene before where to embarrass Jen, her mom gave Nikki this video of her partying and dancing around in college.
The crazy dance video where she slaps her own butt.
Yeah. So Nikki decides to upload this video to Intelligentsia, as bait to like attract them.
Right.
And I put she's instantly, like not even a second goes by, and she's instantly invited to this private intelligentsia meeting.
She is a trusted unit of this group now.
But intelligentsia sends her message that says bro, so they just assume that she must be a guy.
Must be.
So she's like, oh, I'm going to get Pug on the case.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Pug. I need a favor, even though I'm insulting you all the time.
So
Wait, what's his name? Did his name have Pug was part of his name?
His last name was like Puglioso or something.
Okay, yeah. So slightly logical, not purely insulting.
So she shows up at Emil's house, and she's greeted by Wrecker. And they do kind of do this like red herring thing with him where you're like, is he going to do something?
Right. You never trust him because you're like, well, he's part of this shitheel group. And then like, it's always questionable why he was in this group at all. So, yeah.
So Pug and Nikki show up at the meeting, and Pug is wearing an earpiece so that Nikki can still kind of talk to him, although it starts to like cut out. So Todd ends up being at this meeting, and Todd admits to Pug that he is the leader of intelligentsia.
Dun, dun, dun.
He's the Hulk King.
My God.
It's all coming together.
Which, I mean, AJ, you kind of called it with this guy being a bad guy, but like we thought he was going to be an underling and not like the main dude.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming. Yeah.
By the way, now that we know like he's the main dude, in that scene, like, you know, was it last episode? The one where him and She-Hulk were at dinner and he was like hitting on her. Do we think he had even more ulterior motives there? Like if she would actually
fucking point?
like if she would have actually shown interest in him, like would he have gone for it? Yes, exactly.
You think the rejection is a key point in this?
You know, and they also made a point of it last episode to show Todd talking to her boss, that Mr. Holloway guy. So I was like, well, are they going to make him a bad guy? But he wasn't even in this episode.
Yeah. So weird. There's so much stuff that it's not even close to making sense.
So Wrecker gives Jen some tea, and again, I was like, oh, is this tea going to knock her out? You know.
Yeah, why would she take drinks from this guy? She has like no like.
Well, there was that one therapy session, and they all became friends.
Yeah, there's no barrier there. She's just like, yeah, okay, I'll trust you again.
So Wrecker tells Jen that Emil's down at the lodge, which of course ends up being the place where this meeting is taking place. So Emil is a guest speaker at the event and arrives as Abomination.
Why would he like send her to that? Like, why wouldn't he try to misdirect her?
Well, I have another question here. So, like, at this point in the story, we're like, oh, are they going to heel turn Emil? It certainly seems like it. We find out in short order that, no, he's not really a bad guy, but he's like, but then if that's the case, why is he talking to these guys that you would think he knows to be shitheads?
Well, this is so monumentally, like, just stupid and ridiculous. So, it involves, like, in this group session, like, the guy comes out as the king, or what was he?
Oh, yeah, Todd. The
Hulk King.
Hulk King.
But, like, also, he's like, yeah, Emil put this together. So, it ties in Emil as being, like, a bad guy. And he shows up at the session or whatever. And so...
I was very confused about that.
It's so stupid because... So, here's the story we're supposed to believe. Emil was in prison for... I don't know how many years, busted out periodically by Wang. But
Wong.
Wang. Last time it was Wu, this time it was Wang, but it's actually Wong. It's terrible. Poor. This is the most racist I've ever been. But on accident. But okay, so Wang.
Or Wong.
Is it Wang or Wong? Wong. Rhymes with dong. Wong, dong, Wong. Okay, so Wong has done this multiple times. And it comes out like they build him up to be like an okay guy who's done his time. Like he wants to come out and be a good guy. And then he comes out and he makes his secret society. Like he's a leader in this. And God, well, we have to get more to include how stupid this whole storyline is. But like, yeah, so apparently he's done all of this to come out to be part of a leader of this bad group. God, this is so bad.
Well, and I don't know if Todd was Todd. I mean, Todd's the leader of the group, but he made it sound like he was somewhat in line with Emil. But that doesn't seem to be the case either. I was very confused on
Emil
this.
comes to the meeting and he introduces him as like, none of this would be possible without Emil, right?
He does say something like that. So
you think Emil's the bad guy?
But I think Emil was just like motivating them. Like he was like their support system. It seems like he wasn't actually like, we're going to do this to She-Hulk.
How could he possibly have this motivation as a character?
His whole thing is to help people, and he was just trying to help them. Like
It's so ridiculous.
I know it's stupid.
But doesn't he yell something like at these guys? It's like, don't ask for permission or something like bad.
I really don't understand it because
I couldn't get my bearings on what they were trying to do with him.
Well, we'll keep going because we're going to talk about him some more.
Okay. So Jen shows up, and Abomination transforms back into Emil. And that he very quickly like tries to explain to her, oh yeah. She's like, you're turning back into Abomination, and he's like, I swear it's just for like these talks or something. Nikki arrives and tells Jen that Todd is the leader of Intelligentsia. Todd's like, yeah, I got that Josh guy to take your blood, and now I'm going to get powers. And he injects the stolen blood in his arm, and then he turns into a Hulk.
At this point, I wasn't sure what was going to happen because in like the very first episode, it was revealed that Bruce and her had like a specific like genetic like anomaly that allowed them to, go through this transformation. Like it was something very specific, and now this guy has just like taken it, and he's like transforming. And part of me is like, maybe he's just gonna like explode.
Yeah, they kind of teased that something like that might happen, which would have been more entertaining, to be honest.
So okay, yeah. So we're here at this point. It's okay. So he's transforming.
So now stuff just keeps getting sillier and sillier. Titania Kool-Aid Man's through the wall.
And she's going to be a good guy in this transaction.
I mean, this whole thing kind of like right here falls apart, right?
Which they do on purpose.
Yeah.
It's kind of like whose line is it anyway? It's all made up and the points don't matter. Todd tries to attack Jen, but Emil, as Abomination again, moves her out of harm's way. So there he's being a good guy.
Right. That's another weird part because he moves from one to the other where he's like kind of picks her up and he's almost being protective after being like a key player. It's so weird.
Now Bruce shows up, and I guess he thinks the Abomination, assumes the Abomination is like doing bad or something. So he starts fighting the Abomination. So then Jen breaks the fourth wall, and I wrote, Jen tells us that none of these storylines make sense. And now, okay. Yeah, so she breaks the wall, and she's basically like, this doesn't make sense. And now this is where things get off the rails.
So I think this is a good place to pause.
Okay.
So all this is happening. It's going to shit. And like all these good guys start appearing and other characters. And so she breaks the fourth wall and she's like, this all seems like a big load of bullshit, right? And we're like, yeah, it does. It seems like a big, stinky pile of bullshit that's going to go in some weird, stinky bullshit way. And like, everything's not making sense. And essentially what this is the writers. And we've been talking about it. They came up to a corner. They haven't put in the work to have some decent plot, some build up to something. And they're like, what the fuck are we going to do with this? And everybody in the audience is like, what are the fuck are they going to do with this? They haven't set anything up. They haven't put anything in motion. They have all these weird loose ends. And they're like, what are we going to do with all these weird loose ends? How are we going to make this into a final episode? And they're like, oh, I know. Let's go meta and let's pretend like this is all a thing and we'll just slop it into one big fucking, shit pile. And they found out a way to do it. And this is where we keep going.
I mean, I feel like if I was in this writer's room, I would have either quit or been asked to leave very quickly because...
Well, they're not in the writer's room yet, but they're going.
I mean the actual writer's room of this show.
Yeah.
Because...
And we're going to see this in depth.
Because I feel like many times in this show, especially here, some writer was like, oh, this would be very creative. And, if I was there, I'd be like... Well, yeah, but if you think about it for half a second, it doesn't make any... And they would have been like, it's genius. I'll be like, damn it. But okay, so yeah, she's saying all that. All of a sudden, like, the screen kind of freezes, and we get kind of this, like, fake Disney Plus menu.
So there's one other thing, like, when they're in this big group, this is kind of before, like, all the good guys show up. Like, because it's all intelligentsia, it's just a bunch of guys, and they're all, like... They're bringing up all these points of why this show is garbage. And like the writers are trying to comment on this from their point of view of like why all these toxic people are trying to say all these bad things and why it's, irrelevant that they're bringing up these points. So they're still trying to hang on to that storyline or that kind of moralistic point. And then they're going to break out of it and try to approach it again, which is where we're at.
Yeah, so I'll try to make sense of this, but it's nonsensical. So we get kind of this fake Disney Plus menu. She-Hulk like breaks out of like the picture of her show or whatever.
Right, literally breaking through the show.
Right. This is a fourth wall breaking as meta as it gets. And then she sees like this thumbnail that's of like a kind of like behind the scenes Marvel type show.
Right.
So she goes in there. And so now she's basically in our world. She's at the Marvel Studios. And so she goes and she breaks into the actual She-Hulk writer's room.
Right. So she's getting directly in their space. We get to see them. Here it is.
So yeah, she's criticizing the bad and formulaic writing of this finale, saying like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna make another like Hulk for me to fight, like a mirror of myself."
Right, basically all the bullshit that's gone into the show up to this point.
Yes.
It's so hard. There's so much to like try to. There's so much like psychology behind this that it's painful.
And she's like asking them basically to change it. And they're like, well, we can't do that. That's what Kevin wants. And so, again, another meta thing is like a reference to Kevin Feige, the leader of...
Yeah, I was wondering about that pronunciation.
Yeah.
Oh, God, this is so bad.
So She-Hulk's like, well, I want to meet and talk to Kevin. And they're like, nobody gets to meet Kevin or whatever.
And more than that, one of the characters is like, I will literally kill you, because apparently as a writer he has the ability to kill her. And at this point it's kind of revealed, I think unintentionally, that the writers are the real villains of the show.
You don't have to tell me twice. So yeah, she goes to meet Kevin. There's these security guards that try to stop her, but she just like easily defeats them, no problem. So we find out Kevin, and I could see this because I was watching with subtitles on, so it's, Kevin is an acronym. There's a period in between all the letters.
That's kind of a spoiler.
So Kevin is a robot, which stands for Knowledge Enhanced Visual Interconnectivity Nexus.
Okay, so pause here. Like she says she's going to go get Kevin. She's going to talk to Kevin, and they're all like trying to stop her or whatever. And like you see, okay, she's going to go see Kevin, which... Everyone's like, okay, we've gone to the writers. It's time to go to Kevin Feige, whatever. And you're like, okay, so here's Kevin Feige. And then she shows up and it's Kevin the robot. And you're like, well, this was so good. And I think they pitched it as probably she was going to see Kevin Feige. But, like, he did not want his name anywhere near this fucking pile of horse shit. And he's like, let's try Kevin the robot.
I don't know. I've heard, like, he's one of those guys that doesn't really like the spotlight. So I'm assuming they never had him on board.
It's possible, but it was definitely, like, in my mind, that's who she was going to see. And I was just like, it's just like...
That would have still been terrible, just the fact that she's
Yeah, it would have been awful. But they at least broke my expectations, which usually is a good thing. I don't know. But Kevin the Robot.
So they start to talk. Oh, yeah. Kevin tells She-Hulk to change back to Jen and to do it off camera because the effects are too expensive.
Right. God. Which I was like, yeah, thanks for explaining that.
So,
also, how did she had that inhibitor? Did it explain like how she got past the?
I don't think it ever did.
Yeah, it just happened.
So I wrote the character of Jen somehow knows all about the Marvel universe, and so this is the thing I really have an issue with. So because she starts talking to Kevin, and she starts talking about like how a lot of people say the Marvel movies are formulaic and all this. I forget exactly what she says, but she's talking about Marvel.
She's moved beyond being in the universe.
And on the screens behind her are like the movies playing and shit like that.
However, whatever happened, she's in the metaverse.
Right. Here's the thing. She's essentially talking to her God. But not only that, how does it make sense that she basically knows that her universe is fake? Or you know what I mean? Her character...
It's so painful. I fucking hate Meta so much anyway.
I mean, sometimes if it's just like a sly reference, but when it's worked into a show like this, you start thinking about it and you're like, it makes no sense. Yeah. This means this whole show...
Like she knew
she was in a show. You know what I mean?
You pretty much have to come to that conclusion.
Yeah, but she kind of, whenever she breaks the fourth wall, she always like, says something that kind of makes it sound like she knows she's in the show anyway.
I'm definitely biased. I hate the fourth wall stuff. I was like, okay, I can deal with it, but the meta stuff, it never fucking works. I always hate it.
I mean, just the implications of her knowing this. Like, why is she ever surprised? I mean...
Yeah, so now the story is she can write whatever she wants and do whatever she wants. Which... There's also a line like where Kevin is like says something about her going to the big screen. She's like, really? And he's like, no.
I mean, that line was kind of funny.
Well, it was probably the funniest line, but at the same time, you're like, I can see where this is going nowhere. So now,
let me go through. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I want to see.
Well, I just was gonna go through this, and then we can kind of come back to it. But so she pleads her case to Kevin that the show is very formulaic and doesn't have to end so predictably. She convinces Kevin to take away Todd's powers, so he goes from Hulk back to Todd. Remove Bruce completely; he doesn't need to be there. She says she wants to hold Emil accountable, which will come into play here in a few minutes. And she wants to change from nighttime to daylight, because why can't it take place in the day? She also mentions that oh, I like that Daredevil guy. He's dreamy. Bring him back. So here's where they kind of try to future-proof themselves. Kevin says Jen won't be able to ever access him again. So now She-Hulk returns to the new ending where Todd is being arrested. She transforms into Jen and tells him that she'll see him in court. And then Daredevil shows up like she requested. Emil agrees to go to prison for 10 years for violating his parole. So he's being held accountable. So now Jen has a barbecue with her family and Matt. Bruce shows up with his son Scar, so that's where he went.
We had talked about that, so I was actually I was glad we talked about that, and it actually happened. Yeah. I was like, all right, we did.
Something actually paid off.
Right.
So now Jen is allowed to be She-Hulk again, and she goes back to work. And then we get an after-credit scene where basically Wong helps Emil escape from prison and go to that, what is it, Comertage or...
Oh, that tournament? Is that what?
Well, it's whatever they call that place that Doctor Strange took place. That city they live in or whatever.
Yeah, Comertage.
Okay, yeah.
So this is what's bugging me. It's like Emil's character, the motivations, the sequence of actions, none of it makes like a touch of sense to me. Like, he stays in jail for a number of years, going in and out, I guess as he pleases. But he does this for the sole purpose of being like this shitty side character in Jen's story, where he does this weird like thing where he sets up some bullshit in her storyline that never pays off. He goes back to jail of his own accord, and then Wong like immediately busts him out, and he's like, okay, whatever, and they're off, and he's like, oh, do you have any like Wi-Fi where you're going? Because he didn't have any in his little retreat or something. It's so just weird and stupid. Like, his entire, like, he has no motivation that could ever make sense for this storyline. It's just, I hate it, and I want to like him, and I want him to be an important character. It's just nonsense.
It would have been up until this last episode where they have this nonsensical turn with him. Like, I just didn't understand, like, okay, he's still a good guy.
Well, it could have been the thing, like, up to then where he got out on his own accord and he's doing this good thing or whatever. But then they turn him into the pseudo bad guy, and he repents by going back to prison, which he's immediately taken out of. It's just,
I mean, the only thing, and they don't say this, so you'd have to assume it on your own, is that he knows these guys are bad guys, and but he wants to talk to them to try to talk some sense into them. But it didn't seem like that's what he was doing.
But how long ago would he had to have known that's what he was doing to spend like 10 years in prison? Because now that he goes back to prison, like, he has no problem just leaving and going with Wong.
And I don't.
It's just, there's no way to tie it together.
And I don't think we understand his relationship with Todd at all. They didn't explain it.
Right.
Because Todd is a bad guy. I mean, obviously, and Emil would know that.
There's no logical connection. It's just complete garbage.
But still, the thing I'm hung up on most is just the meta stuff. Because even before she turned into Hulk, I mean, she has a superpower, basically. I mean, to be able to know
I guess that's
the secrets of her
power.
universe.
She knows exactly how to break out of her movie and go approach this. And
I mean, she's essentially like a multiverse jumper. At
this point, yeah. I mean, you have to give her that because she's already done it. Except they've told her she can't do it again.
Yeah, because they're like, oh,
it's hard to tell you.
We
how
can't
much
leave this door open because it's fucking stupid.
I just think the whole thing was just a throwaway.
I mean, I was going to ask you, what did you think about the meta aspect of it? Her actually coming into our world, like it does. I don't know.
Part of me, I know this show is made ahead of time, and this episode was written out and acted, and everything was done ahead of time, like before we saw the first episode. But it feels almost like they saw the negative reviews and said, let's phone it in and
I felt this was definitely sculpted to other issues that happened inside the show while it was happening.
Like how people were reacting to it?
Right. It doesn't feel like this was written all prior.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, because he even says like some of these shows are going to be hit and miss, blah, blah. It almost seems like they're reacting to how people reacted to this show.
They definitely felt especially when they're talking to the writers, it was like they were trying to find a way to write this off.
I mean, these shows are done far enough ahead of time, but I can't imagine they added any from the time we saw episode 1, they couldn't have I don't think they would have added anything, is what I'm saying.
Like they would have had to known how shitty it was going and how what people were saying about the show and the negative reaction to it. I mean, if you wrote that before,
Like, what was
you would have to have been like,
what was the point?
you'd have to have a premonition. Like if that's the case, it would have required like a level of genius that I don't even understand.
You know what I think annoys me about this show is, I get tired of like hearing people like, news stories about people bitching about nonsense on social media like incessantly. And this show, and we've talked about it, harps on taking down basically like toxic males. And don't get me wrong, like those people exist, they're shitty. And I don't mind this show maybe talking about them a little bit, but it's constant. And you feel like you're being lectured to. Like throughout this whole season, it felt like we were being lectured to.
Like I can't imagine them writing this final episode without having some kind of input from the other episodes that moved them in a certain direction. I mean, it wasn't all filmed before they released it, right?
I would think so.
That's the
You
impression
think it was?
Most TV shows are.
I mean, the special effects, all the stuff they have to put into it, like...
Because I felt like it was self-referential, like... I don't know.
It did seem like, that's what I was thinking too. It seemed like it was so reactionary, like...
Yeah, it felt like they were reacting, yeah. Which, I mean, if they pre-wrote that...
That's some foresight.
That is incredible foresight and like defensiveness. It's
Yes, the show is very defensive. But like the main villain in Intelligentsia, like they're the embodiment of like trolls online. And I'm just like, do we need to keep coming back to this?
Well, I mean, at this point in the game, they had to come back to it because they didn't have any other story.
Yeah.
But the whole meta thing and her coming into our world.
I mean, could that be it? The story fell apart in their hands and they're like, we need to write a few more episodes and this is where we're going. And like, they realized that the story had fallen apart and then they're just like, okay, it fell apart. So now what do we do? I mean, the writing is so bad.
The meta stuff, her coming to our world, it breaks your brain if you think about it for even a couple seconds. And for them and they knew that, which is why they threw in that line of Kevin being like, oh, you won't be able to access me again.
Well, that's the same thing with them coming back to the writer's room, and the writers are like, well, we thought it was good. And then they list out a lot of the problems with it, and you're like, they know they're having story issues and really bad ones.
I mean, I still think the actual writer's room thinks this was fucking genius. And original.
Maybe.
It was original, I guess, but it's not good because it's illogical.
It was just a clusterfuck.
Yeah, it was a mess. The only thing I like is that the Hulk's got a son, which we thought he might.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to see that story.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything that came out of this show, it's that it was a vessel for some plot development for
Well,
the
another
Hulk.
thing is, I think Wu and... not Wu and
Wong.
Wong. I keep calling Wu, Wang, Wong, Wee, Wu. But, yeah, Wong. I'd like to see more of the Wong and the, what's his name?
Oh, Emil.
Yeah, Emil, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more of that, and it seems pretty obvious they are going to do something with that, so...
I mean, I wouldn't want to see a whole show of those two.
I mean, they might get folded into another show, but I would like to see more of them together.
He'll probably just make a cameo in like a Doctor Strange movie or something.
The thing is, there were points where I thought Emil was going to be a very interesting character, but this particular storyline, I thought it was a hot mess. But if you put him in the hands of another writer, he's still got a lot of freedom to go in interesting directions.
I don't know, but he could potentially be on the Thunderbolts, right? Because, like, he is super powered and he is kind of like an in-between, good and evil kind of guy. And I
mean, I guess he would fit the Thunderbolts team in that respect, but I think they've kind of already announced their lineup, and he wasn't on it. Doesn't mean they aren't holding back a couple surprises. So.
Yeah, I mean, Wong has been weaving in and out of so many storylines.
Yeah.
By the way, you know how the guy that William Hurt, the guy that played Thunderbolt Ross, he died.
Oh.
The rumor is that they're going to get Harrison Ford to play that part.
Harrison Ford's getting old, man.
He is. He's getting up there.
Wasn't he the drill sergeant in Captain America though?
No, that was Tommy Lee Jones.
Tommy Lee Jones. Right.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I don't remember that. Tommy Lee Jones is like so. There's like side stories of being like a very serious asshole.
I can see that.
He's what I hear. He's very serious and very curmudgeonly.
Very serious, yeah. Like a grumpy old man
Yeah.
stereotype.
Oh, that's no fun.
But I mean, he's good and he can fit a lot of roles. So
Yeah, I don't even know what my final thoughts on this show.
I just hate it, and like this was like the keystone of my hatred.
Yeah, I feel really let down by it because like I felt like they misinformed us on what this show would be. You know, like if it was just going to be some throwaway that you don't have to like invest your critical thinking into and like try to understand what's going on and everything, then you just put it on the background. That's one thing. But if it's like, you know, we're told that this is a Marvel show, it's going to count. Like, you know, it's going to matter in whatever else is going on out there. And we're like reading into it and trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And, you know, it wasn't WandaVision. It wasn't Loki. It was just some blah show that they really didn't put a lot of effort into it going anywhere.
I mean, if they were going to do it, I would either completely reboot or just like get an entirely different set of writers and go a different direction. I mean, I'd walk in there and be like, everybody's fired. Everybody's fucking fired. And that would be how I started the first episode in the meta space. And then I would leave it forever.
Actually, you know what scene I wish they would have added that would have at least made a little bit of sense going forward is if there was a scene maybe with Kevin and the people in the writer's room being like, okay, you're going to write her so that she doesn't have this omniscient like power.
It's so
and
hard
never
to walk away
did,
from it
or
now.
you're gonna retcon this basically. You're gonna retcon this shitty thing we just wrote, so it doesn't affect the universe going forward.
Like you start the next episode of the season with like flashbacks to this episode, and then she wakes up and is like, "Oh, that was a horrible dream." What the fuck do you do with this? It's such a blemish on the entire universe. It's just garbage.
So like, are they going to make a season 2?
God, I don't know. I don't think it was good enough to warrant another one.
I don't think
I'm curious what the ratings were. I mean, with the streaming stuff, you don't know. But again, just like with Miss Marvel, which we really didn't like,
Yeah, I didn't like
it
it.
seems like audience reaction has been mostly positive.
I'm surprised.
I think if you just like optioned her and pulled her out and put her into the active universe and let somebody else write them, maybe.
She definitely needs a different writer behind her, or a group of writers. This writer's room, boy, it did not do it for me.
It sucked bad.
You know, between Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, and this show, I don't even know where
I hated both of them. This one's at the bottom. Like, I think I gave them like a 2 and a 3. I'm 0.
It's tough because just like with Hawkeye, I was like, this isn't great, but like I've seen worse. And then it got to the last episode, and I'm like, boy, that was really bad.
Yeah, I mean, only thing I can give Hawkeye is that at least it was consistently one show the whole time.
It was more of like one storyline. It was more consistent.
Yeah.
It
sucked.
wasn't as bad as this.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
I hated what they did with Kingpin.
Yeah.
That was anger-inducing.
No, I mean, I think
I like
think they
Kingpin a
also-
lot, and I feel like they did not do him justice. But I really thought Hawkeye was going to be the bottom of the barrel.
I thought the best part of this show was Daredevil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say about this show over like Miss Marvel is like, even though I didn't like either of them, I felt like this show at least was more entertaining than Miss Marvel, which I just thought was kind of bland and at times offensively stupid. Well, this show is offensively stupid at points too, but
Yeah, I just felt Miss Marvel was like it was really kid oriented. This was at least geared towards adults, but
I gotta say, this is under Miss Marvel for me. This is the bottom of the bucket for me. I hate meta so much, and then it was just so bad altogether.
if there's just a meta reference, like sometimes that's fine with me. But like this, this did not work for me. I don't know what you thought.
yeah, I mean, I was when I first went into this show, I thought it'd be cool like Deadpool, you know, like sure she breaks the fourth wall, you know, that might be interesting, but the way she does it, it's not fun, it's not clever, it's not, you know, she's not like Deadpool, you know, in that sense. So
You're right. Every time she fourth walls, it's never funny or anything.
yeah.
And the other thing with Deadpool is you can almost write off the fourth wall breaking as, oh, he's crazy.
Yeah,
got
he's
screws
talking to himself as much as
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
It's not like it was portrayed in this show, you know. Boy, guys, any final thoughts on She-Hulk?
Well, it birthed us Scar, so we're gonna see the Son of Hulk, where that goes. I'm interested in what happens there.
I'm interested in that. Hulk has had like so many different turns in his character, probably maybe more than anybody else.
The most development for sure.
And like, I find that I really like that because like, at first he's like the most flat character, and I really don't like him that much. He's one dimensional. He's angry, you know. He's Hulk smash, and now he's gone through like kind of all these transitions, and now he's got a son. I don't know. I've definitely softened towards the Hulk. Like he was probably like during the Avengers, he was one of my least favorite characters, and now I've really come to enjoy him.
Now, are you guys more interested? Would you guys be more interested in a series that explored, you know, those missing years when he was in space and like how did this son come to be and what's that story? Or would you guys rather be like, oh, what's Hulk and son together like?
Well, I think they'll have to give us some of that backstory. I don't think I need it all. But yeah, I would see mainly the story with the two together and maybe enough backstory to make it interesting.
Yeah, but they would have to explain why Hulk didn't tell Thor anything. You know, like he lived this whole life with all these events and everything.
Yeah, that is a question. Like, when exactly did this happen? Because it doesn't seem like it would have happened while he was training with the Grandmaster.
Yeah.
It would have happened between Age of Ultron, which is where he left, and before Thor Ragnarok.
That's a weird space.
But that's when it would have had to happen.
Yeah.
That's when he was in space or whatever.
I mean, you also have the question of, like, how did he find out? I don't know.
That's what happened in the case. I mean, that's what we assume happened.
When the spaceship
that's why the spaceship was, I guess, trying to find him. That's why they took him. You know, we assume that happened during
you're probably right.
this show.
So, I don't know. I'm curious to see where that goes.
Yeah.
Of course, maybe She-Hulk will just find Kevin again and have him make the sun disappear.
Like, I have to admit the Scar story, it is a little disappointing that he showed up like that, because like if you see his story, like the actual like breakdown of what happened, how he was born, and you know, it's like this crazy story where Hulk was sent by the Illuminati to Sakaar. He crash landed there and started a whole new life, and you know, he meets this lady, and you know, they have like this revolution on the planet because she's like she's pretty powerful and he's powerful, of course, and he's like this champion fighter, and he frees these people and forces a rebellion and becomes their new leader and everything. And you know, part of the Scar is born from him meeting that lady, but then there's a explosion from the ship that the Illuminati sent Hulk to Sakaar in. And that explosion kills both his wife and supposedly Scar, the son. But Scar survives in like a kind of a crazy, like, it's like there's powers involved, like planetary powers. So that's how he survives, and Hulk doesn't know it, but it turns out he has a son later on. So maybe they'll come back to that, but...
Oh, yeah, I would assume, like, it'd be weird if they didn't, like, kind of explain that. There's like, nope, he just has a son now.
Yeah, that they would be leaving out a lot.
So I assume at some point we'll get a show that kind of explores that or something.
Yeah. I'd like to see more She-Hulk, just not in this format.
Yeah, I would, if it's good, I'm down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of felt that way about, like, Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel. Was like, I'm down to see her in other stuff, but I don't need more of this.
Right, yeah.
So there you have it. We weren't particularly fans of this finale of She-Hulk or the show, really, overall. But if you guys out there liked it, please comment and let us know. Like, tell us what we got right. Tell us what we got wrong. I would be very curious to know how people feel about this. Oh, yeah, we're definitely over time. All right. Well, please, after you leave those comments, go ahead, subscribe if you haven't already to the YouTube channel. You can subscribe in audio form on your podcast service of choice. Leave us thumbs up, positive reviews, all that good stuff. And then why don't you come over and talk to us on Twitter? Guys, where can people find you on Twitter?
At a name for this too, and that's number 2.
My gaping anus, she wrote. At twitter.com.
I'm going to follow. And, of course, you can find me at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. And that is going to do it for all of our shenanigans and poppycock this week. Please, please, please tune in again next week. Bye, guys.
Take care.
Have a good one.